Hi everyone, thanks very much for joining me again. Today I want to talk about the difference between productivity and production. Students often get confused between those two terms. They're very distinct but related. Okay, before I start, I want you to cast your mind back to the first thing that you learned when you started economics, which was the economic problem. Remember what that was? That was trying to meet unlimited needs and wants with limited resources. Productivity is at the crux of the economic problem. Okay, so I've drawn a little diagram here to try and illustrate what I mean by that. On this diagram, think of this side of the diagram as representing resources, the limited resources, and think of that side of the diagram as representing unlimited needs and wants. Resources remind you again what we mean by resources in economics. By resources we mean the four key resources, which is land, labour, capital and enterprise. Let's discard enterprise just for a moment for our illustration, because enterprise appears everywhere on this diagram. Without enterprise, none of this process actually works. So let's put that one aside. So let's look at the other three resources. And the other three resources were land, capital, and labour. And let us also just pause for a moment to remind ourselves what we mean by those terms. By land, as economists, we mean everything on the ground, above the ground and below the ground. So on the ground, we're talking about forestry, agriculture, above the ground, solar energy, wind energy. Below the ground, we're talking about the things that we mine, coal, iron ore, etc. By capital, we mean the tools, the machinery that we need to convert raw materials into something that we want as an end product. So that's what we mean by capital. And labour is what it says on the tin. Labour, we mean people who are working and make the thing happen. Okay, so those are resources. Those resources go into this, what I've drawn as a magic box. This is the production process. That can be a factory, an office, whatever that method of production is. Okay, it goes into there and it gets changed into the end product that we want. So let's call that output. Okay, so now let's start talking about the terms production and productivity. Production is the total value of this output. That's it. That's production. So if the output increases and the value of it increases, then production increases. Productivity is something different. Productivity is about the efficiency with which we made that output. So we want to use as little resources as possible to make as much output as possible. And the more output we can make with fewer resources, the more productive that we are. So generally, we would try and look at output by reference to possibly one of these resources when we measure it. We measure it generally by reference to the most expensive of these resources. Usually we measure it by reference to labour. So you could measure the amount of output, the value of output, divided by a unit of labour. That unit of labour could be an hour of labour time or a day of labour time, the unit of labour. So the higher that calculation is, the more productive that we are. Therefore, it follows, does it not, that we can increase production by either being efficient or inefficient. And by efficient, we mean the cost of the additional resources we put in here is more than compensated for by the output we get at this end. If that's what's happening, if we're using £100 worth of resources to produce £200 worth of output, we're increasing our productivity. On the other hand, if we're using £200 worth of resources, additional £200 worth of resources to produce £100 worth of production, the productivity is going down. But in both cases, the production is going up. And that's why production and productivity are entirely different things. They address different things. Productivity is about efficiency. Productivity is about how efficiently we are solving the economic problem. Thanks for listening. See you again. Bye now.